Hello, I'm Nancy Zemmel, Director of Student Life and Learning, and welcome back to McGill Law's Ask the SAO, the podcast. Today, we are meeting with Associate Dean Andrea Bjorklund of Graduate Studies and Bianca Bourgeois, Senior Admin and Student Affairs Coordinator, to discuss graduate studies in law and the application process. First, I would like to acknowledge that McGill University is located on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe nations. McGill honors, recognizes, and respects these nations as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we meet today. Bianca Bourgeois travaille au Bureau de Programme des Études supérieures en droit depuis juin 2015. À ce moment, elle est principalement responsable des initiatives de recrutement et de financement externe. In 2017, Professor Bjorklund, holding the LE Fortier Chair in International Arbitration and International Commercial Law, was named one of McGill's Norton Rose Fulbright Scholars in International Arbitration and International Commercial Law. Professor Bjorklund began her 3-year term as Associate Dean Graduate Studies in Law in July 2019. Prior to joining McGill, Professor Bjorklund taught at the University of California, Davis School of Law. Professor Bjorklund has a JD from Yale Law School, an MA in French Studies from New York University, and a BA with high honors in History and French from the University of Nebraska. The application deadline for all graduate programs in law is December 20th. Applicants must complete the application form, pay the associated fee, and upload all required supporting documents by that date via the online UApply system, which is available through McGill's Future Graduate Students website. All you have to do is click on Preparing to Apply. So I'd like to welcome Professor Bjorklund and Bianca Bourgeois today at Ask the SAO, the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today to talk about graduate programs in law at the faculty.
Thanks so much for inviting us, Nancy. Really happy to be here.
Yeah, it's a great pleasure.
Thank you. With graduate programs application deadline quickly approaching of December 20th, I thought it would be a good time for us to sit down and maybe talk through graduate studies, the application process, and what potential candidates might want to consider before applying. So why don't we just jump right in and start with, why would a candidate think about applying to McGill Law for grad studies? What makes our program unique? And what are the benefits of obtaining an LLM or a DCL?
Well, Nancy, I'll start out and say that, I think that McGill is a great place to do either a master's degree or a doctorate. One of the strengths of our program is that it's relatively small so that you can create a very cohesive sense of community, but it's big enough to have a vibrant and engaged community with a variety of students pursuing a variety of specialties. So I think we really have a place where students can thrive both amongst themselves in the graduate student cohort, but also with our undergraduate students, and with great opportunities to interact with and work with professors. I think about my own decision to move to Montreal and to start teaching at McGill. I felt as if there were various layers to consider, and all of them were positive. So the first was, McGill Law, which is a wonderful and dynamic community where we have, I think, more specialists in international law in particular, and also in comparative law, than almost any other faculty in North America, and possibly more than as many other faculties in the world. McGill's commitment to trans-systemic education means that virtually all of the professors have some interest in comparative law, whether that's comparative domestic law or comparisons across international regimes. So I think that we're extraordinarily rich there. And McGill, McGill itself is one of the best universities in the world, so that also is appealing. We're in Montreal at the next layer. We're in Montreal, a wonderful multicultural city, which is fun, which has possibly the best restaurant scene in North America. Some people in the United States would say that New York rivals it, but I'm not sure that's really true. Anyway, it's a fantastic place to be, with festivals and joie de vivre that's hard to find. And then, of course, Montreal is located in Canada, which is a wonderful country.
Thank you. All true. And what about LLM and DCL options are offered, and how long do the programs usually last? So when students are planning, how long can they expect to be in Montreal?
So for our LLM programs, we offer 4 options. So we have an LLM in general law, in air and space law, in bioethics, and in environment. And at the doctoral level, we have 3 options. So once again, a DCL in general law, comparative law, and air and space law. So the majority, I would say, of our LLM applicants do apply to the general law option, as it offers quite a bit of flexibility or really build your own program. You can choose after your required courses, you can choose which courses to complete your program, your electives, which is a great advantage. But we do also have more specializations as well for students who come in and are like, I know I really want to do air and space law. We do have these options that we offer them. The LLM non-thesis is really designed it's a program that's designed to be completed within 12 months. So the majority of students would do the fall, winter, and summer term. So it's a great option if you're looking for this kind of intensive, immersive experience, and then to be finished within a 1 calendar year. For our LLM thesis option, that program, it takes usually a little longer to complete. It's not a course-based program, so it's much more research intensive. There's still some coursework to do. And that program typically takes between, I'd say, 16 and 24 months to fully complete. However, LLM thesis students do have up to 3 years to complete the program. So that gives them more time. And at the doctoral level, students have 6 years to finish the program, but the length of time does vary, and it really depends on an individual student's trajectory and how long it takes you, and how you want to build your program, and how long it takes to submit your thesis for evaluation. So it does vary, but doctoral students have up to 6 years to finish the program.
Yeah, I was for the doctoral program in particular, the earliest that one can do it really is 3 years. Occasionally students manage that, but it typically takes between 4 and 5 years. It's not impossible to do it in 3, but usually when I say everything has to line up perfectly, and the student's initial proposal has to really work and be thoroughly kind of fleshed out almost before the student arrives. And that does not happen that often.
Right. And again, when planning to submit their applications, candidates often ask the question, how many applications do you receive? So, combien de demandes recevez-vous par an?
Bon, pour le programme du doctorat, l'année dernière, on a reçu 59 applications. C'était un peu moins que d'habitude. D'habitude, on reçoit entre 76 et 84, mais quelque chose comme ça. Pour les études de maîtrise, on reçoit entre 232 et 281, peut-être même 300. Application. Pour répéter en anglais, last year for our DCL program, we received 59 applications. That was perhaps a little lower than usual. They normally go between around 65 and 84, 85. For LLMs, we normally receive last year we received 281. We normally receive between about 250 and 300. So in that general range.
So we also Aussi, nous disons d'habitude d'année en année pour une classe d'environ 55 étudiants en LLM et de 15 étudiants en doctorat. So from year to year, to give, if anybody's, the people who are listening, around how many students do we aim for to begin the program in a given year? So typically, it's around 55 LLM students and 15 doctoral students. So that should give you a little bit of an idea with the number of applications we receive and the number of places that we're trying to fill.
Yeah, we receive a directive from the central administration about what our goals are, and so they range, I'm going to say, from 45 to 55 LLM students and from about 12 to 15 doctoral students, and that's held pretty steady for the past 5 or 10 years. So we don't know what we'll get for next year yet, but that should be very similar.
And I mentioned earlier that the application deadline is December 20th, but how does a candidate go about submitting an application?
So to submit an application, like you just said, our deadline is December 20th, and that's the deadline to submit your application on the system, but also to upload all your supporting documentation. So it is usually important to apply a little bit before that to give yourself a bit of time to be able to upload all your supporting documents on the system. In order to apply, you'll use our UApply. So UApply is an online system. It's the graduate admission system. So that can be found at mcgill.ca/UApply. And you create a profile and you're able to submit your application and all your documents will be uploaded onto this system. So everything is done electronically. You don't need, during the application process, you don't need to send us any paper copies of anything. So your transcripts, everything, you are uploading that on our online system. And also there is another, if you are required to take a language test. So many of our applicants do need to take a language test based on there's certain criteria that you can be exempt. But if you don't fit into one of those criteria, you need to complete a language test by December 31st of 2020.
Are there any other documents they should prepare or have on hand when they're about to submit an application?
So there's a number of documents. So for LLM applicants, the required documents are, we ask for 2 letters of reference, a research proposal. For the research proposal, there are general instructions on our website that you can refer to, a CV, all university level transcripts, and that includes transfers and exchange credits, really important, and a language score depending on if you're exempt or not. And for doctoral students, it's all the same documents, except you also must upload a copy of your master's thesis or of a long research paper that, if you don't have a master's thesis, a long research paper that you wrote in one of your classes. And all of that can be uploaded online. In terms of the letters of reference, what you'll be doing is you'll be entering the email address of 2 referees, and the system that will prompt the system to send your referees an email, and your referees will be able to upload their letters directly on the system as well.
Great. And probably a frequent question we get at this time of the year is, what does McGill look for in an applicant, and how can an applicant ensure or try to have their application stand out?
Well, we look for somebody who will both benefit from our program, and who will give to our program, right? Who feels like they want to be a part of the community, who will take advantage of what we have to offer and also enrich our intellectual community. We're looking for an application. This may seem very basic, but an application that is well written, that does not have careless errors in it. We're looking for a good research proposal. The expectations for a DCL research proposal will be higher than the expectations for an LLM proposal. So for a DCL proposal, you should be identifying the area in which you want to work, and you should have some preliminary ideas about what your project will look like, how you're going to craft it, how you're going to create it, where it fits in with the existing literature. So I guess I'd say it should be about something a little bit more than just a topic. You should have something in mind about what you're doing with that topic. For an LLM proposal, having a topic that is interesting and just in a way that you think you're going to explore it is probably enough. So I think the threshold there is a little bit different. I'd say that your research, your application should tell your story. So they're all going to be different. We do a holistic review. We don't kick anybody out for I don't know, for any one reason. I would say, you know, that if there are any particularities in your proposal, gaps in your record, really uneven performance, and that you want to explain, there's an opportunities to submit an explanation for those, and I'd encourage you to do that. And you know, that's not, it's not fatal. We definitely look at, as I say, we look at a holistic review. If you, you know, had experienced some personal issues and that affected your performance in one semester, but your rest of your record is good, then tell us about that. And kind of explain your story. If there are gaps, you know, most of our students are, you know, coming within a couple of years of finishing their first law degree, but we do have some non-traditional students, more senior students, but, you know, we do expect to be able to see what you've been doing, you might say, over the past years. And again, I'll say we had an application a year or two ago from somebody who graduated, worked for 2 years, and hasn't been, you know, has, from the record that I have, had not worked or done anything for the past 20 years. And there was no indication on the record of what the person had been doing. And that's a little bit problematic. I happened to learn from different sources what the person had been doing, which involved a lot of family caregiving. And that's fine. Then I understand, you could say, why your professional accomplishments went into hiatus mode for a while and why you might want to reconnect with your career and your academic ambitions through the LLM. So I just encourage you to explain things like that. References are important. You know, do spend a little time thinking about your references and who you're going to pick. At least one of your references should be an academic reference. You know, this is an academic program. We're looking for markers of academic success. So at least one of your references should be able to speak to your academic abilities. You know, the second reference might or might not be an academic reference, depending, again, a little bit depending on your background. If you have worked for 20 years and you have a reference letter from a colleague or something that is good, and in that case, you might be able to have a testament to your academic capabilities, even from somebody who is not your law professor. But you know, because this is an intellectual academic program, that is, you could say, the primary thing that we're trying to assess. So I guess that is to say, you might have a family friend, this happens, you might have a family friend who has a highfalutin role, a highfalutin position that, you know, you say, oh, I'm going to have, you know, Justice X write me a letter of reference. And that letter will say something like, oh, I've known Nancy Zemmel since she was a little girl and she's wonderful. And you should really have her as a student because, you know, she's been great. You know, she's just a lovely person. And all of that is true, I can tell you, but that does not help me admit you to the LLM program. That is, so that those are not particularly useful. So that's just a word of warning. Bianca, anything that you can think of that we should?
No, I think I'd reiterate what you said about, so on our website, we do get a lot of questions. We ask for our minimum grade requirement to be considered for admission is a 3.0. So that translates usually to, for international students, an upper second. However, as Associate Dean Bjorklund mentioned, you can still apply if you don't meet that minimum requirement. And the admissions committee, they are aware of different circumstances and different grading scales around the world. And there is a space in your application to include a a justification or an explanation of your academic trajectory. So you can still submit an application, but you recommend that you do include an explanation in your application. That'll help the admissions committee fully evaluate your file with all of the information that they need.
Yeah. And I guess maybe just to elaborate on this, we make, I'm going to say, initial recommendations about admission to the law faculty, but ultimate decisions are up to the central administration at McGill. So if I have to recommend admission, and if the file, let's say the less straightforward the file is, the more I have to justify the application. So if there was an anomalous semester, a poor semester that dragged down your average, I can say, look, the student did really, really well in the last 2 years of school. We're confident there's an upward trajectory. And we know from the student that, there was a death in the family and that really caused poor performance one semester. So I'm confident that this student will be able to succeed. But I need to have that information. If all I have is a bare record and the average is, a 2.0, I'm not going to be able to convince the central administration that we should take a chance.
Right. Yeah. And I think another question we often get is about supervision and the process at the faculty about assigning supervisors. And so they often ask, do they need to apply for a potential supervisor when they're submitting their application?
So for LLM students, no. We assign supervisors after you arrive, and really there's absolutely no need or requirement to reach out to a potential supervisor. If anything, I would discourage that. But for doctoral students, it's a little bit more complex. There is no need to reach out to a supervisor. When we evaluate doctoral candidates, we will assess who on the faculty might be a good supervisor, and we will contact that person to ask if he or she is willing to engage in the supervision. If there's somebody clearly in your field with whom you want to work, and maybe with whom, if you've done a master's degree and that person has said, you should go to McGill and do your doctorate with Richard Gold because he's excellent in intellectual property, then you can put that in your application. And that, when I say that will be considered. Depending, I don't have perfect control over assigning supervisors. So sometimes a professor is on sabbatical. Sometimes a professor already has a very full slate of doctoral students. And if that's the case, we don't reject those applications. We try to find somebody else to engage in the supervision. But there's no need for you to secure a supervisor in advance, either for masters or for doctorates. But if you, again, for a doctoral student, if you have somebody with whom you want to work, that information is helpful, but you do not need to secure the agreement of the person. I will do that in the course of deciding on the application.
Given we're in the province of Quebec and Canada, I often get the question about the level of French that may be required. Et la question, dois-je comprendre, parler, écrire ou lire le français?
Donc, non. Pour étudier, non, ce n'est pas nécessaire. For those who do speak English, I thought this would be funny to answer in French. No, you do not need to speak French to do graduate work at McGill. There might be a couple of courses that are offered in French that you would not be able to take, but most of our classes, upper level classes, which are the classes that graduate students take, are offered in English. So and most of our graduate students do work in English. They can do work in French. Mais je vous encourage d'apprendre le français au moins un peu. Si vous appreniez le français, votre vie serait plus riche. Québec est une province française. avec la culture, les spectacles. Il y a plus de choses à faire si on apprécie le français et parle et comprendre le français. Donc, for those of you who don't appreciate or speak or understand French, I said, that we are in the province of Quebec, which is a French-speaking province, and your life will be much richer if you speak some French or try to learn some French. But it is perfectly possible to get along in English, certainly at the law faculty, but really in Montreal as well. The further you go outside Montreal, the more likely it is that you'll find fewer people speaking English, and you'll kind of need, be desirable to have more French. And as I say, I think life here is much richer if you speak and understand French because of the importance of the French culture, but it is not essential. And it's one of the things that you can explore once you get here.
Also, a number of our students, when you do come to McGill, there is an opportunity to potentially take French courses as extra courses to your programs. And a number of our students do take extra courses in French. So those are usually offered via the French Language Center. And so you go to the French Language Center and they assess your level of French and will place you according to your level in a relevant course. And a number of our graduate students do take advantage of that at McGill.
Great, thank you. Another very common question is funding, and what is available to a candidate who's considering applying about funding and financial assistance.
So funding for LLM students, it's important to note that funding is limited, but we do have, I'll talk about 2 fellowships that you can submit applications for if you're interested. So the first fellowship that you can apply for directly is the O'Brien Fellowship. So that's a fellowship in human rights and legal pluralism. For LLM students, it carries a value usually of $25,000 per year. And for doctoral students, it's $35,000 per year. There's an application form. It's available on our website. You fill in the application form, you send it to us via email, and then all O'Brien applicants are evaluated by the O'Brien Committee. And that application is also due. So your application to McGill Law is due on December 20th, and the fellowship application is also due on December 20th. And for this year, we have a new fellowship as well. It's the Research Group on Health Law and Graduate Research Fellowship. For that is for LLM with thesis candidates or DCL applicants. For LLM thesis candidates, it's $2,500, and for DCL candidates, it's $5,000. So that's for students who are applying to our program and that are interested in researching health law, or that their proposal has a health law focus. For that, you also apply. All the directions on our website, and the application deadline is also December 20th. For doctoral students, funding is a little different, as doctoral students who enter the program are offered a guaranteed funding package for 3 years that usually includes tuition plus a stipend of $17,500 for 3 years, and for 3 years.
Yeah, and there are opportunities for doctoral students to apply for other fellowships as well. Bianca has mentioned the Health Law Fellowship. There are outside external funding sources such as the SSHRC, the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, and the FRQ, which is the Fonds de Recherche de Québec. So there are a couple of internal McGill possibilities as well. So doctoral students, though, we do give an initial funding package to all doctoral students for 3 years. And doctoral students also can work as research assistants or find, some other ways to supplement that package.
Another important item or topic students or candidates often ask about is about student engagement activities, and how can they participate in the faculty, and, that sense of community and student engagement. And so how can they participate or join faculty events, research groups, work as a research assistant, all of those good things?
Well, so there are student activities, including the Graduate Law Students Association, which runs several different events throughout the year. And then there are individualized, I guess, specialties based, as you kind of suggested, on different research groups. So the Center for Intellectual Property and Law and Policy normally has 1 or 2 conferences a year, obviously, or usually around the area of intellectual property. The Private Justice and the Rule of Law Research Group has a couple of events a year. The Health Law Group has a couple of events a year. And often we have, when I say intermittent events, there's the Neper Prize in Arbitration, I helped organize the joint North American International Economic Law Conference a couple of years ago. And for all of those, we, when I say rely on, we are utterly reliant on student research assistants to help us organize those activities. So there are lots of opportunities with respect to, putting together conferences, putting together lecture series, working with professors on different projects. So you can try to be a research assistant for different professors. Professors advertise for research assistants, but also students frequently simply reach out to a professor in the area in which they know they're interested, just to say, do you anticipate needing somebody? I'd really like to work with you. So there's both kind of a formal and an informal process. So I would say that every year I hire between 3 and 6 research assistants. I mean, so there's some variability, but every year I have several research assistants, and most, like my DCL students, are my research assistants usually for several years. It's because they're around for several years. In fact, I have one student who was my LLM, my doctoral student, and then my postdoc. And I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do when he goes, but that's a crossroads I'm going to have to face pretty soon. But it's really nice. It's one of the great things here, I think, is that there's a lot of opportunity to collaborate with professors. Many of us write jointly with students. So I just this past year I just before starting this call, I finished page proofs on an article that I wrote with 2 postdocs, one of whom was this person I just mentioned, who's been with me since he was an LLM student. I wrote a book chapter with an undergraduate student who is now clerking on the federal court. So there are usually quite a few opportunities, and I think most of us really look at ways to involve students in the work we're doing.
And there's also lots of events that are started by students for students. So usually via the Graduate Law Student Association. So every year we have a graduate law conference. And for doctoral students, there are numerous events such as a DCL research series, monthly DCL coffee hours where all doctoral students meet together with a speaker, a DCL retreat, and many, many more events organized by the Graduate Law Student Association.
And I guess the final question of any potential candidate or applicant is what comes next. So what are the career opportunities available to students with an LLM or a DCL degree?
So there are numerous career paths for our students. Many of our doctoral candidates do go into academia and are teaching around the world, in the UK, the US, Australia, Singapore, but many others go into other avenues such as private practice, in-house counsel, government work, judicial clerkships, international relations, nonprofit work, and even legal publishing. So there's a variety of careers that specializing that obtaining an LLM or a doctoral degree will open up to you.
Yeah, I think, the traditional mode is to try to teach, and that's still true. I think many of our doctoral students want to do that, but many work in government, in the United Nations, for various international organizations. some practice law. For our LLM students, the typical thing is that an LLM student will return to the practice of law after or will start the practice of law after doing the LLM. Obviously we have several specialized LLMs that Bianca mentioned at the beginning of the session. So students who do an LLM in air and space law might very well go work for their country's air and space law authority, right? Or air law authority usually. Or work, we have several graduates who work for ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and the like. But for the most part, LLM students practice law or possibly go on to do a doctorate, whether that is here or elsewhere. So, for the students who are certain that that's what they want to do, they usually do a thesis. It's not a requirement usually, but they normally will do an LLM with a thesis, whereas students who are more practice oriented will likely do an LLM non-thesis. There's no requirement of one or the other, but the thesis LLM is a good preparation for further academic work.
Thank you. Any final thoughts, suggestions, information you'd like to share?
Well, speaking as the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies, we're starting a kind of admissions review pretty soon, and it's really exciting because it's such an optimistic and exciting time in your life to be thinking about doing future graduate work. And we've just welcomed this last year's admitted students to McGill, and they're starting to settle in. I'm assigning LLM supervisors, and it's really fun to kind of put, it's a little bit of an interesting year this year, what with COVID-19, but it's kind of just interesting to learn more about, the students and to see them actually arrive and take a place in our community and become part of our community. So I look forward to receiving your applications, and I hope to welcoming you, and really I hope welcoming you in person in a year.
And if you have any questions about anything or you're interested in our program, you can always contact us. We are reachable via email, and our email it's on the website, but it's grad.law@mcgill.ca. If you'd like to, any kind of questions about your application, if you'd like to be put in touch with some of our past graduates, if you want to know more about the student experience, we can also put you in touch with the Graduate Law Student Association. So just contact us and we'll get back to you.
Super. Thank you so much, Bianca, Professor Bjorklund, for joining me today. And I wish you a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to McGill Law's Ask the SAO, the podcast. Be sure to tune in again next time. If you have any podcast ideas or suggestions, please email the SAO at sao.law@mcgill.ca. Just enter podcast in the subject line. Thank you et bonne journée.